All right. So I'd like to thank everyone for being here. This is something that came out of, so the Village of Rybrook has an airport advisory committee, and this is something that came out of the committee to try and set up a task force, a limited duration task force that is simply put together to look at the master plan, the county master plan. And so once the village decided to form this committee, we put out invites to a lot of different communities that we know are affected by the airport. Rybrook, as everyone knows, is one of the communities, among others, directly next to the airport. So, like many of you, we're heavily impacted by anything that goes on at the airport. So that includes, the noise, traffic going around it, but also because we're downstream along the Blind Brook, anything that happens there runs down to our brook, through the village. And so what we did was put together this task force to take a look at the master plan supplement that the county is going through, but also to advise on issues, as it says in the agenda, to advise on issues or concerns regarding the expiration and renewal of the terminal use agreement, which obviously has impacts on all of us and what can and can't be done at the airport. So before we start going into the agenda, maybe what we can do is just go around and introduce ourselves. And what I may do is, I'll start by introducing myself. Peter, I'm going to end with you because what we'll do as part of the agenda is move on to an overview of the master plan supplement and the TUA, as well as some other questions. And then we want to open it up to some group conversation. So this is, again, just a kickoff meeting. I think our hope is to start a conversation and potentially set the, set it so that we have the structure in place and we have a working group that can then move forward and have meetings. We'll have to talk about, how often and when we'd like those meetings to be, who might participate, but also who might be the chair or co-chairs, preferably, of this task force. And I think we'll be looking to, municipalities other than Rybrook to hopefully take the lead on this, since I think the county kind of views us as a constant worm in their ear, constant earworm on what we think is going on at the airport. So why don't we start with some introductions. My name is Jason Klein. I am the mayor of the Village of Rybrook. And what I'm going to do, I'll just go down and call people out if that's okay, in the order that you're on the screen, so we don't dissolve into mayhem of everyone trying to introduce themselves, which often happens at these things. So I'll try and get everyone in here. So John, who's listed as John and Karen, why don't you go first? I think it's John Mungo.
Yeah, it is. Hi, I'm John Mugno. I live in Rybrook. I've lived here since 2016, and I have been a member of the village's airport committee since maybe 2018 or something like that. And I also am a person who, if you've ever seen them, conducts interviews for the Rybrook Focus program, which basically is focused on community issues and interviewing people who are familiar with the issues and who live in the community. That's available on the village's website.
Great. Thank you, John. Next on my screen is Andrea. And I'm going to apologize in advance if I mispronounce anyone's name.
That's okay. My name is Andrea Meekum. I am a representative of the Newcastle part of the committee. I've lived in Chappaqua for 23 years and am new to the board this year.
Great. Thank you. Next on my list is Greg Elders.
Hi there. Also part of the Newcastle Airport Advisory Committee. Yeah, that was just reformed. I guess there was an old one. I moved here in 2020 and have a bit of a background in aviation sustainability, teach a class at Bond College, so I know a little bit about some of the noise issues and regulations.
Great. Thank you. Next on my list is Jonas.
Hi, I'm Janusz Richards, and I am village clerk in Village of Portchester, representing the Village of Portchester. I'm really not representing as a clerk, I'm just representing as a citizen who happens to live right on the pathway of landing strip here. So I asked the mayor, and they had no one else at that moment, and they asked that I participate. I'm very interested. I fly out of that airport as frequently as I can. I really love the airport, and looking forward to participating with the group.
Great. Thank you. Next on my list is John Mastracchio.
Hi, this is John Mastracchio. I'm from Greenwich, Connecticut. I've lived here about 20 years. I got my pilot's license at that airport back in 1985, and I remember being told, be a good neighbor. You don't want to ruin this great place. So I'm aware of when they're not being good neighbors. I've worked with, I met Peter Schlachtis maybe 2 years ago when we met with George Latimer, and given George a recommendation for something about reducing noise at the airport, which he seemed to take to heart. I spent 12 years on the RTM here in Greenwich. I work closely with town government, and I've worked with Chris before on the Greenwich Westchester Task Force, which I think we're going to revitalize. I'm looking forward to working.
Great. Thank you. Next on my list is Juliana.
Hi, good evening. My name is Juliana Alzate. I'm a trustee of the Village of Portchester. I've been in Portchester pretty much all my life. I also live on the pathway of the runway. I live close to Janusz, so it's an important idea here for me, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Next on my list is Michael.
Hi, good evening. My name is Michael Pollock. I'm from the town of North Castle. I've lived there for 32 years now. I'm a member of the Westchester County Airport Advisory Board and also a member of the town of North Castle Planning Board. So it's very interesting when those two roles intersect.
Absolutely. Next on my list is Nick.
Good evening, Nick Everett. I live in the city of Rye. Grew up in Rye, and I returned there in 1985 with my wife and children. I've been on the City of Rye Planning Commission for 21 years, and I've been chairman since 2011. And I know Michael Pollock.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Next on
Nick.
my list is Rich.
Hi, everyone. How are you doing this evening? My name is Rich Flood, resident of Greenwich. Grew up in Larchmont in Westchester, of course. Have been living in Greenwich since 2015. Our first selectman, Fred Camillo, asked me to volunteer my time to serve on the committee, so happy to be here. We are in backcountry off of Round Hill, so it's one of the sections of Greenwich most impacted by the airport. So happy to contribute to the conversation and look forward to learning more about the plans. And nice to meet you all.
Great. Thank you. Before I get to Peter, we're also joined on this call by Chris Bradbury, the village administrator for the Village of Rybrook, and also our assistant to the village administrator, Greg.
Great. And Mayor, if I could just say, so as staff, one of the things we just want to do is try to facilitate your conversations, make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible, and also hopefully provide maybe a part of our website where we can create a homing place for any kind of documents or information, the recordings of these videos for anybody that can attend, any of the supporting documents that may be of help to you. So, we want to try to provide you the resources so to help with the dialogue.
Great, thank you. And yeah, that's a great point that I was hoping to mention at some point. I'm glad Chris remembered because I probably would have forgotten. But what we'll try and do is after this, we'll send it around an email with a link to the website, the specific area of the website where we'll try and upload every supporting document or anything that people come up with. So last, I'll have Peter Schlakis introduce himself and then just give a brief overview of where the TUA and the master plan supplement process stand.
Okay, thank you, Jason. It's really wonderful to see a group like this coming together. So kudos to all of you individually and to your municipalities for supporting this attempt to see if, as a group, we can find areas of common ground and ways to collaborate to, I guess, amplify the voices of our communities in ways that can have a positive impact on county policy at the airport. My name is Peter Schlaktis, and I chair the Rybrook Airport Advisory Council for some years and have been on it longer than I can recall date-wise. I'm also a member serving with Mike Pollock, who I'm glad to see here, of the Westchester County Airport Advisory Board. I was nominated by, along with Mike, by County Executive George Latimer about 7 years ago. I chaired that board for a couple of years, and I guess I should also mention that I'm on the steering committee of a nonprofit organization called the Coalition to Prevent Westchester Airport Expansion. So that is a gathering of community groups, environmental groups, playing a bit of a watchdog role at the airport to make sure that the county upholds its longstanding policy to limit airport expansion in the ways that it can legally. The reason that we're all together, and I should also add, I'm a member, of course, a resident of the village of Rybrook. I live in the community of Belfair, which more or less abuts the airport. So I guess it's natural that I'm engaged and involved. Although interestingly enough, because I'm so close to the airport, the fact that I'm actually not exactly under the flight path makes a very big positive difference to me personally. But a couple of years after I moved into the community, a prior administration at the county, we learned from a neighbor of ours who was serving on the county airport advisory board that they had been told more or less at the last minute the county was going to build a large new de-icing facility across the street from our community, at an area of the airport that at that point was just woodlands. And needless to say, we were alarmed. Not that anybody has anything against de-icing airplanes safely, but as we studied the county's plan, it was going to cause more aircraft to have to cross the runway and aircraft to have to travel further after getting de-iced before they could take off. And we sort of mobilized with other communities. We had help from people in Harrison, people in Greenwich, people in Portchester, and further afield. And I learned an important lesson from that airport, which was that with concerted action, we were able to create a 180-degree about face and reconsideration of airport policy. The county took a closer second look at the plan and decided that it had real flaws, and ultimately pulled the plan and went to a different strategy. And so, I think we can take heart and know that if communities like us and our residents come together behind certain principles or behind certain recommendations, we're not, spitting into the wind, as it were. We can have a real impact because we are lucky enough to have an airport that's controlled by county government, which is unusual. And since county government is responsive to voters, and together we represent stakeholders and voters, that are not insignificant, we can really have, more of an impact than we might assume. So, so I guess, Jason, should I just pivot now and spend 5 to 10 minutes just presenting the two issues that are essentially part of our charter, our mission? Okay.
That would be great. Thank you, Peter.
So the first, so basically we're coming together to deal with two relatively short-term issues that are we expect to be coming to a head at the airport. One is a rewriting or revising or amending of the master plan, and the other is at the end of the year, the expiration of contractual agreements that the county has with all of the airlines, the commercial airlines that are using, that use the main passenger terminal. So let's take each of those in turn. First of all, every airport has a master plan. The FAA requires it, and it's a precondition for funding and grants that come from the federal government to pay for important infrastructure and things at the airport. And by the way, I've been involved in airport advocacy for a lot of years, but that doesn't make me I don't consider myself an expert. I'm certainly not a professional when it comes to this. So John, it's good to see you, and there are others here who I know things about the airport, and if I misspeak about anything, please don't hesitate to correct me. And obviously a lot of us will have perspective and information to contribute going forward. But the bottom line is the airport has to have a master plan. There was a master plan done back, I think, in the 90s, late 90s. And then for a long, long time, there was no master plan. During the Astorino administration, it was recognized that the county needed a new master plan. And so that a process to create one was started. I was on the airport, I was not on the Airport Advisory Board, but I was attending Airport Advisory Board meetings as a representative of the Rybrook Airport Advisory Council. And I can attest to the fact that that county effort stretched over years of internal deliberations that rarely involved any input from the Airport Advisory Board or members of the public. And then shortly before the end of County Executive Astorino's term, a plan was advanced. A couple of public meetings were held. Those meetings were very well attended, and the overwhelming majority of residents were critical of elements of the master plan, as well as the process by which the master plan had been developed and adopted with minimal public input. But the master plan was adopted anyway, and by the county. It was, however, not submitted to the FAA. And then current County Executive George Latimer took office and found himself, as he explained during several public forums he held, kind of between a rock and a hard place, because the FAA was making it clear that they expected a master plan to be submitted, or else Westchester's funding might be jeopardized. So Latimer submitted the master plan that had been developed by his predecessor, but with a public statement to the public and to the FAA that the county was going to consider amendments. And that process was commenced, I think it was 2018, 19. They hired consultants both to handle the technical aspects and to handle a much more open public engagement process. Members of the county advisory board, including myself, were invited to sit in on those meetings to select consultants as a gesture of openness. They were done. Certain initial preliminary meetings were held, such as one in Newcastle, I can recall, in the winter, I think of 2020, like January. And of course, shortly thereafter, COVID hit us, and the ability to bring the public together for forums like that was interrupted for an extended period. Not only that, but as the county has pointed out, the economics, one important aspect of a master plan is to project the needs that an airport will have, and then what options the airport has to meet those needs, including some that seem more realistic than others. A master plan it's not a blueprint per se, but it is an accounting of airport needs, strategies to meet those needs. And while it doesn't have, any force of law or anything, it certainly can make it easier for things to move forward if they're in harmony with the master plan, and it can raise additional questions and hurdles for approaches that are at odds with the master plan. At least, again, that's my understanding. So the master plan has now sat essentially, at the beginning stages of being revised for several years due to COVID, due to uncertainty over future needs because of all the disruptions in aviation that have come from COVID. And thirdly, due to lawsuits that were recently acknowledged by the county to be a factor. Those lawsuits have been progressing, but one of them involves questions of what types of operators need to use the terminal versus whether they can use private terminals at the airport. Remember that only 15% of the activity at the airport goes through the main passenger terminal with commercial airlines. Approximately 85% of the operations at the airport take place through other terminals and hangars at the airport that handle charters and commercial aircraft and corporate aircraft, private aircraft, otherwise known as general aviation, charters, timeshare type operations like net jets and flex jets and the like. So that is where that's where things stand now, and it's our estimate that we have at least a good 6 or 7 months before, but we don't know for sure, before the county gets back seriously into the master plan process. And that gives all of us an opportunity to acquaint ourselves with the elements of a master plan, the elements that we might care about as municipalities, to find, again, some common ground and explore ways that we can support each other in furthering our respective interests. Because once that process begins unfolding, it is likely, based on the county's representations, to include significant additional public input. So I'm going to leave the master plan at that. I'm going to quickly shift to the terminal use agreements and regulations, which is, of course, well, I shouldn't say of course, which, for those of you who may not be aware, Westchester County has a law, a county law, that imposes certain limitations on commercial aircraft. That's that 15% that we were talking about that use the passenger terminal. That limits them to 240 passengers per half hour combined arriving and leaving, departing. And only 4 gates or 4 airplanes can use the terminal at once. And that is tied to 2 things. Number 1, the legal capacity of the terminal. And number 2, the fact that these regulations have been in force since the 1980s, which predates federal legislation in 1990 called ENCA that essentially took away a lot of local control over airport traffic and operations, or at least flights in and out. So because we had rules that predate that, and because our terminal has consistently maintained the same legal capacity during that period of time, the FAA blessed this county law back in, I want to say 2003, 2004, with a formal letter that we can share with all of you. And it has, and that law requires that any commercial airline flying in and out of Westchester County Airport must have a written agreement with the county. That agreement essentially restates the limitations. It describes the process of allocating slots at the airport for different airlines within those limitations to create as fair a process, I guess, as possible. And number of other things, but one important thing it does is the airline not only agrees to abide by these rules and limitations, but agrees not to challenge them in court. For whatever reason, even though different airlines have come and gone over the years, all of the agreements have been written to expire at the same date. And that date is December 31st of this year. Now, to be clear, the law does not expire, and the law requires airlines to have agreements. So presumably by default, if the airlines want to continue operating at Westchester, they would have to sign some sort of new agreement or extension before the end of the year. But if the airlines wanted to challenge these limitations, and what's known as the Terminal Use Procedures Law, then as of January 1st, they could, because the existing agreements that prohibit them from doing so will run out. So it raises big questions because number one, Westchester County Airport is already the 3rd busiest airport in New York State by many measures. It is larger in area than LaGuardia. It has a longer runway than Chicago Midway. There's plenty of undeveloped land. There is certainly the potential for the airport to become busier. The other reason that it's very important is that the county has really not shared much in terms of its strategy. It certainly has stated that it fully expects and intends to have terminal use agreements in place going forward after the end of this year. But beyond that, there hasn't been a lot of assurance or reassurance or much shared in public. So this is, this certainly, to the extent that there's the potential for significantly greater airline traffic involving larger planes with, bigger noise footprints, this obviously has the potential to concern all of our communities. And given that, this is all happening within the same time period as the resumption of the master plan, the terminal use regulations were included in our group's mission. And I'll leave it at that. There's a lot to talk about and unpeel when it comes to the airport, but we don't all have to become experts to help guide our communities towards constructive dialogue with the county and with each other. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Peter. And I think that's a very, it's a very good update on where we stand, and really what the pertinent issues are of what the county process is going through right now. And why the timing is so crucial currently, given that that they have to submit an updated master plan, but also that, like you said, these agreements are all expiring at the same time. And I believe that Chris has a synopsis of what Peter was just talking about that we can post to the website, where we'll share a lot of information, but also we'll send it as a follow-up to this meeting.
Yeah, I'll summarize it. And also, Mayor, I also just put it in the chat, some quick summaries if people want to refer to it during the meeting. But hopefully you guys can see that in the chat. But if not, we're going to send everything out after the meeting as well, a little summary, and also a link where you can get more information on our website. Can you guys see it on the chat?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Chris. And we'll also make sure that that's sent out as Chris said. What I forgot to mention at the beginning, I'm trying to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm going to try and keep this meeting to about an hour, which we're about halfway through already. And I think, before we start to talk about potential chairs or, meeting dates, I think it's important that we maybe some of the people from other communities outside of Rybrook maybe share what the major concerns are for members of those communities as in relation to the airport, and really what people are most concerned about, what they're maybe worried about the county changing, what the impacts are from the airport on your communities, anything that you're willing to share. So I don't know if anyone wants to go first. Maybe we can do the raise hand thing, or people can just, I'm sure everyone's cordial here. If someone starts talking, I think we'll continue from there. Yeah, Don.
Just a couple of quick observations. Back when George Latimer took office and they started reviewing this, and it was talk about the master plan, they had attempted to, the county had attempted to change, how do I describe this? Figure out ways to get around the terminal use agreement, and he multiplied 240 by 48, which is 24 hours in a day, and decided that that was how many people could pass through a terminal at any one time, and that was kind of knocked down. And then there was a discussion about, we really need to expand the parking lot because there's not enough cars. And at which point I made it a point of letting them know that I was around when the Quonset hut was turned into the terminal, and the discussion was, let's build the parking garage so we can only limit this number of people. So my response was, so it's functioning as designed. So the county is really trying to get around all these restrictions that are in place. And I don't want to paint them as evil. They're not. They're trying to fill budget holes, and they're looking for opportunities to do that. So we really do need to be vigilant and diligent. I'm not sure which is better. So I'm looking forward to this group getting together to be watchdogs. And with regard to Greenwich, we walk a fine line. Rich will bear me out on this, and that is, county doesn't have to listen to us at all. We are bordered to the airport, but we're not in New York State, so we can complain all we want. So complaining generally doesn't work from our side. We need to partner. One of my complaints is the arrivals between midnight and 6 a.m. of private jets, with no regard to noise. So we've gone out of our way to thank John Insara. Corporate jets know when they're kind of breaking the rules a bit. So I've kind of gone a little on and on, so I'm going to step back and let it
I was
Great,
thinking,
thank you. And I think, you know, what John's referring to there, in case everyone doesn't know, is the voluntary curfew, where it's semi-enforced, where they have to pay a fine if they're landing or taking off outside of the normal hours. And I think, like you said, yeah, absolutely, this is great to get this group together as a unified voice. And you also make a good point that it really depends on who the county executive is. That we don't know what the county is going to be doing. It's really based. I mean, you know, we've seen recently two very different county executives, with the Latimer administration almost seeming like they want to keep things the way they were, as opposed to the Astorino administration before that, trying to change things, like you said, multiplying the 240 times the 24 hours per coming and going. So, Rich, I know you wanted to speak.
oh yeah, I just thought it was made sense for me to follow up on John's remarks, you know, and agree and acknowledge with him that, you know, Greenwich residents are in a tough spot and that, you know, the county doesn't have to listen to us. We do border the airport, and, you know, personally, we've got a couple of issues. One is the air traffic, the late night air traffic. Recently, we've noticed an increase in low-flying helicopters that cause the entire house to shake. And in the summertime, it's, you know, the amount of traffic just goes through the roof with the private planes and the charters, I imagine, going to and from the Cape. But another issue that we're dealing with from the airport is vehicular traffic. Waze and Google Maps directs all traffic on the Merritt from northern points to exit at Round Hill Road to access Westchester County Airport. So instead of going up to King Street or one of the other paths, they are, you know, hotel shuttles, Uber, taxis. They're getting off at Round Hill and cutting through Port Chuck Road to Cliffdale Road. These very narrow, dark, winding roads, and it's used as a thoroughfare to access Westchester Airport all hours of the night, early morning. We now have an early morning rush on these streets. You know, a lot of these folks are not familiar with the roads. They drive fast, they drive recklessly. They're very, very narrow. So, you know, we're concerned about both air traffic and vehicular traffic. We are impacted by both. And I'm a little concerned about, Peter, what you shared. The lack of transparency from the county is a little alarming with regards to, you know, the history and sort of the lack of clarity around what the future plans may be. So it's very good to hear. Thank you for sharing. Definitely got my attention. So yeah, that was just, you know, speaking for my immediate neighborhood and the vicinity around us. That's what we hear a lot about in terms of concerns about the airport and its activities.
Great, thank you. Anyone else concerns from their community? Yeah, John. Oh, John, you're on mute.
I want to follow up on what was just said. The first is that it appears, from what I understand about activity at the airport, the private airlines, the fixed base operators, are trying to expand their operations. And this will, of course, have an effect on the number of flights going in and out. And since they are the main violators, I understand, of the voluntary curfew, it's probably going to mean more overnight flights. So I think that we might be able to, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know all the rules here, but it may be possible if we, as the affected communities, speak with a united voice to say, look, we're not necessarily opposed to them upgrading their terminal capacity, not the scheduled airlines, but the fixed base operators. But in return, we want some stronger restrictions on their overnight flights, something like that. I think we're going to have trouble stopping them from simply upgrading and perhaps expanding their facilities, but I think we might be able to negotiate something in return. That's just a thought I have about this. Secondly, addressing our two members from Connecticut, yes, you don't vote in Westchester, but I think this is going to be an issue that involves the FAA. And so you do have a congressman, and he can speak to the FAA on your behalf, and in fact, then on our behalf. Because I think we're going to have to mobilize some political pressure in order to achieve some of the goals we might want to pursue.
Mayor, could I just add one thing to what John was just talking, as well as Rich?
Please, Chris.
So one of the things, just to make sure everyone's up to speed on the litigation, one of the litigation issues there, because as we talked about, the 240 passenger limit is for the commercial flights at the main terminal. But the county is litigating this issue where one of the private operators is basically trying to run more like they're a public organization, and they're putting their schedule online and encouraging people to sign up for flights, thereby bypassing the 240 limit and the use of the terminal. So they're going after a more expensive market, but they're clearly advertising it more like a commercial flight, even though they're a private operator operating out of one of the fixed-based operations. So the county, to their credit, is litigating that issue. But, you know, it's important to note that that's the type of thing that's going on at the airport, where the airline is trying to fight it, saying we don't have to follow the limits that are in place, and we can operate this way out of our private fixed-based operation, out of one of the fixed-based operators in their hangar through their private flights. Peter, is that basically mostly accurate?
It is. I would say that there's actually a cluster of companies, not just one, that have come together for this lawsuit that are challenging the county, which is trying to say, hey, you're operating as like an airline according to our definition, which is the definition in the law that was approved by the FAA. So you need to operate out of the terminal, and you need to operate in a way that doesn't that respects that 240 passengers per half hour, and they're saying no. And just FYI for people to know, while this is being litigated, the status quo is being allowed to continue, which is essentially where they operate above and beyond the airline limitations. So anyway, that is. Both sides have argued their case. It's in front of the judge. If so, the judge could decide in favor, I guess, of either party, or I think the judge could also send it to become a full-blown trial, a jury trial. And the expectation is we'll hopefully hear by the beginning of the summer which direction that's gone.
Great. Thank you, Chris and Peter. Anyone else have any comments from their community? Concerns? Yeah, Nick.
So Rye has three real concerns. They're water, water, and water, both quantity and quality. So flooding is a major issue, as it is for Rye Brook, and that's a big concern of ours. We've also noticed, and some of that water is coming from Greenwich, and some of the facilities, the schools along King Street can do some better things there as well. And we've also noticed increased helicopter traffic flying fairly low along the shoreline.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and certainly the water is a concern for Rye Brook as well. I don't know if anyone here was present, but it was probably about a year ago, I think, that the county offered a tour of the airport to look specifically at the stormwater mitigation techniques being used. And I was on that tour, and certainly we were talking. It happened to be a rainy day, and we were talking quite a bit about what potentially could be done to help that along. Certainly and the Village of Rye Brook has worked with the City of Rye to try and look at flood mitigation projects once you get beyond the airport. But absolutely, water is a big concern. And for us, especially during the winter when the de-icing operations. Peter, you had a comment?
Yeah, just to add a little context on the water side, because when I was talking, we've been talking about impacts, but we haven't really been describing those impacts. I think there's an assumption, and a good one, that noise is one big impact. And it's not, let's just be clear. There's a lot of science behind the fact that noise is not a nuisance impact. It's a public health impact and has real impact, real effects on people's health. That's number one. Number two is the water. The Blind Brook, a main branch of the Blind Brook, runs directly under the airport and flows out of it, with all of the, with all the potential to collect water from all the paved surfaces, impervious surfaces at the airport. On the other side of the airport, less than a couple of 100 feet, or 100 feet in some cases, well, maybe not 100 feet, but 100 yards for sure, is the Kensico Reservoir, the Rye Lake section of the Kensico Reservoir. And I think no discussion of the airport and its impacts is complete without understanding that the Kensico Reservoir is the catch basin for water from New York City's reservoir system. So millions of people drink the water that goes through the Kensico, and that includes a very large, a very sizable percentage of Westchester County's population as well, including, Rye City, Rye Town, Rye Brook, Portchester. Our water providers get at least some of their water from the Kensico, and nobody's. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of debate going on about the quality of the water, but the good news is New York City still has a permission to not have to filter the water, and pays very close attention to water quality and pollutants, etc. But the flip side of that is that Westchester County Airport several years ago was declared a brownfield by the New York State Department of Environmental Protection because of PFAS chemicals leaching into the groundwater from firefighting foam, primarily we think from firefighting foam sources that were used over the years that contain those chemicals. And there's really no doubt that those chemicals are getting into the Kensico. They're just apparently, luckily, not getting in to the point where they're getting measured as a problem at the places where water is coming out, drinking water is coming out of the Kensico. So the county, to its credit, is taking this very seriously, working with the Department of Environmental Protection, seeking ways and acting on ways to mitigate pollution at the airport. But it's not the first time that there were petrochemical pollution at the airport years ago, and we don't, nobody really knows. At the time that the county took care of the petrochemical pollution, they didn't know about PFAS. Now they're trying to take care of PFAS, and nobody knows if there's something else brewing that we're not focusing on. But the bottom line is you have a large industrial facility right next to the main source of drinking water for millions of people. This is obviously something that could never be done today. We have to all, be urging the county to be good stewards and act conservatively, if anything, to protect our drinking water as well as, flooding and other water issues.
And just to add to that, so just to make sure everyone's clear, stormwater though has mostly been diverted to the Blind Brook now. So new stormwater that hits in there is, if you think of the airport, the southwest portion of the airport, there's two retention basins there. And what happens is that's where it gets released. It goes through across a driveway on Purchase College property just outside Rye Brook, but then does come back into Rye Brook and Harrison, and then into the city of Rye and down to the Long Island Sound. So both from a flood perspective, as Nick was talking about, as well as for stormwater, as well as the de-icing fluid, like the mayor said, that's a concern. It's gotten better, and they are working on those ponds right now. But the de-icing's improved, but I'll give you a sense about a local impact. it wasn't so long ago, just a few years ago, when what happens is they store the de-icing fluid and some of it gets stored in those ponds. When they get released in the winter, when it gets released, it goes down the Blind Brook and there's this odor. So just from a municipal impact, I think we had 28 fire calls in one weekend because people just didn't know what the smell was. They thought it was gas, but it wasn't quite like gas. So that shows you, we were kind of scrambling around with the Portchester and Rybrook fire departments trying to chase down what we knew was de-icing, but you still have to go to the calls. So, that's an example of a local impact.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And to me, it always smelled like onions or rotting onions a little bit, and something that's definitely noticeable in Rybrook. So again, well, I guess, does anyone have any other comments from the communities? And then I would just say that, again, the purpose of this task force is really to look at these specific issues, the terminal use agreement and the changes that may be coming, or the renewal that's going to be coming at the end of the year, but also the master plan process that the county is going through, and to provide a unified voice from multiple communities, showing the county that this doesn't just impact one community or communities differently, that this really is a regional issue and something that affects all of our communities. And so I guess, this is really just the kickoff meeting. Our hope is to continue these meetings, start to come up with something that we can present to the county, saying these are our concerns and these are some steps that perhaps the county should follow when looking at these renewals, or things they should be aware of. And so I guess my first question is for the people on this call: does this timing tend to work? Do Monday evenings work? Would you like to see a different timing? I don't know how best to ask this, and I guess we can send out another doodle poll or something like that. Maybe we can do a quick show of hands of who thinks that Monday evenings tend to be a little bit free, at least. I see a few hands. Oh, good. All right. I think the overwhelming majority there seems, so I think maybe we'll keep it. And I guess the next question is there anyone who would be willing to chair this task force? As I said, Rybrook tends to be, in the county's ear a lot. So we feel that maybe it might be better to have representation outside of Rybrook, if there's anyone so willing.
Mason, can I make a quick suggestion?
Please.
So I was thinking about it, and it's kind of, I imagine members of the task force here might be concerned and not know exactly what they're getting into, at this stage, which I think is fair. Also, I don't know that we necessarily need to or want to burden any one person. So I'm just going to make a suggestion that we form an executive committee of 3 to 5 of the 14 current members, based on, maybe how many volunteers we get. And then let that executive committee kind of decide how to take care of who presides over meetings, et cetera. But this way we can have a few different municipal perspectives represented in the leadership. And as things shake, no one has to worry about kind of taking on too much. And as things shake out, we have a group that can help steer us through that.
I think that sounds like a great idea, Peter. And I think by suggesting that, you just volunteered yourself for the executive committee.
Actually, I don't think I should be. I wear a lot of hats already, and I think
right.
there's plenty of room for others. Although obviously, I'll be more than happy to help with my knowledge, etc.
Great. Thank you. So do we have anyone who might be willing to volunteer for that executive committee? Again, it wouldn't necessarily, and I think there's still a lot of, research and education to be done for ourselves so that we get up to speed, before we start into the process of, keying in on some of the items that we'd really like to highlight for the county. I won't say making demands of the county, but
And from the staff perspective, obviously Rybrook is happy to house the information, get information if you need it. We're happy to volunteer on that end of it. So whoever it is, or whether it's a committee or individuals, you'll have somebody to work with on the staff side to help pull it together.
Yeah,
May I-
be willing
I-
to work on the committee.
May I say something?
all right, please.
I just wanted to let you know that the Village of Portchester on the first Monday and the third Monday of the month does have board meetings scheduled throughout the year. So if you are scheduling for Monday, hopefully it will not be the first or the third Monday of the month. That's all I wanted to ask. Also, we talk about this master plan, the previous one, I guess, and the agreement for the terminal. Is there one from previous? Is there access to the previous one to see what it looked like and what's in
Yes.
it? You know what I'm saying? Because I think that would be a good start for all of us, at least
Yeah,
for me
Giannis-
it would be.
Giannis, it's on our webpage, and I'm going to send a link following this meeting, probably tomorrow
Thanks.
or the next day. I'll send out to everybody where those resources exist. So, I'll provide all that to you.
Thank
Uh, Jason and Peter, we have a term here in the volunteer fire department. It's called being voluntold. And I'm going to suggest that I'm going to volunteer Peter Schlachtis to be the chair pro tem, just because you know where all the landmines are and what we're trying to do, with the expectation that after a few meetings or so, when we all kind of have a better feel for things, it might make sense to hand that back off. Does that make any sense?
I thought we were friends.
Just a sunset chairmanship. How about that?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to try to play that. I'm happy to try to play a temporary role, but I really do think that this group ultimately will benefit from having, more diverse leadership. And if there were couple of people that volunteer to work with me as an executive committee, then I think that would be the best.
And again, to reiterate Chris's
John.
point, we certainly have staff in Rybrook that's willing to help with that. And I'll even volunteer them to go a little farther and help with some of the writing once we start to determine what key points we want to make. But
Count me in
certainly
on the
disseminating
executive.
information.
I see in the chat that North Castle has a conflict too on Mondays.
Yeah.
Which Mondays of the month do you guys meet?
We have a meeting right now. So I'm here and Larry is at our planning board meeting. So we meet regularly. So what's today, the third Monday of the month, or?
The fourth.
The fourth, yeah. So it's generally the second and the fourth Mondays, and the planning board meets on Wednesday nights, once a month. So if we could avoid the Mondays and the Wednesdays, we'd avoid more conflicts for us. And Peter, I would be happy to work with you on the executive committee.
Great, thank you, Michael. Then maybe we have our village boards on the second and fourth Tuesdays. Potentially we could do it a first or third Tuesday.
Does anyone have a conflict on the first and third Tuesdays of the month?
We have planning commission meetings on Tuesdays,
How often? Dave?
twice a month, but
Twice a month?
they're not set to first, second, or third.
Chris and Mayor, can I make a suggestion? So since there's probably never going to be a particular day of the week where everyone's going to be free, so can we do like an alternating, maybe like 1 week a Monday, 1 week a Tuesday, or any iteration of that?
Yeah, we could try that. I haven't heard of Thursday being a problem. Is Thursday?
Try Thursday.
Yeah, we can send out some kind of poll for this. I mean, probably the reason we all find ourselves on this meeting is that we tend to volunteer for things and get involved in our communities. And so it's not a surprise that we'll have conflicts. I think I'd be more concerned if it were people who had no conflicts. So we'll send out something. Maybe we'll set a date for the next meeting, and then send out some kind of poll to see what might work moving forward. But I think, as Greg just touched on, we could potentially alternate. Personally, I don't see this task force meeting more than monthly, but I think, if anyone feels differently, we can correct that, or or move in a different direction. So I think so far for the executive committee, we had potentially Peter on a pro tem basis, John Mugno, and Michael. Anyone else? Maybe if we had one or two more people. John. All right, John, I see raising his hand. And anyone else have an interest?
I'll do it.
Yeah,
Okay,
all
I'm
right,
there. All right, great. I think that's a great start. Does anyone else have any other questions, concerns related to this? Again, Chris will send out more information, a recap of what was discussed, a little bit of extra information, maybe the previous agreement there, and or other things that may be of interest. We have a little bit of a start of what some of the real concerns are for our communities, and I think for a lot of us, it's really the same. Any other comments, questions?
Yep, Jason, just a suggestion, if everybody could come back with, let's say, if this is the right number, 3 concerns their community has, just to make sure we're all kind of looking at the same issues. Because maybe when everybody comes back with 3, well, it turns out that the group as a whole has 4. Just to play it safe, that we're casting a wide enough net.
All right, that sounds great. Just from my quick note taking, I think we had 7, but
Okay.
but some of them are a little bit, some are more just notes, not really the because I think water comes up there kind of 3 different ways. So, but I think this gives us a really good starting point. And again, like John said, maybe we come back each with 3 concerns, start to work from there, and then we'll be able to hone in on what we really feel as a group. I'll attend these meetings. I'm gonna, after this one, step back from my role, because we do have 2 representatives from the Village of Rybrook on this committee. It was really just that because this had come from the village, I thought I'd take this opportunity to lead this first meeting and then step back a little bit.
Jason, can I ask one more question? Why isn't
please.
Why isn't Harrison represented?
They were invited. They chose not to send representatives. So, Chris, I think there were 2 municipalities that we invited that hadn't been heard from or declined, and potentially we want to.
Yeah, we invited Harrison. We invited they didn't answer us. We invited White Plains also. They did not respond. And Mount Pleasant, I think, was it? I think we did.
Yes.
And they did, and they didn't answer us either. So there's 3 communities that didn't answer. On the positive, what is there, 7 communities? I think this is pretty great that we have 7 communities that are willing to work together and see if there's some commonalities of interests, of things that we can all work together on. I think this is kind of exciting.
Yeah, this is the first time that we've put together anything like this. So, again, I just want to thank you all for being here and for representing your communities. And I guess, the 3 communities that were mentioned, if anyone knows anyone from those communities that, can reach out to the leaders in those communities to see if they wanted representation. And we can always try again once we say that, hey, we have this group formed and it's meeting. We'll get, do you want to have anyone attend this meeting? Which may be more attractive if they know that it's already happening and that, that there's a specific meeting date.
We just ask that it goes through their elected board first to be appointed. That's all.
Right.
Or selected. It doesn't have to be a formal, but even if the board will select, they select them.
All right. Any other questions,
Yes. Mayor Clark,
comments?
just to point of clarification. So are we gonna try to figure out another meeting date, just our next one tonight? Or are we gonna do like a poll that Chris and I can take care of like tomorrow, whatever? Or do you want to do that now?
My personal feeling was that we have a few members of an executive committee now. I think we can leave the next meeting date up to that executive committee to decide when the next meeting will be based on the comments that were made here tonight, and then maybe send out a poll saying, or at least saying, here's an alternating schedule that we're looking at. Does this work for everyone? Where we'll at least have enough representation that we feel we're getting comment from the majority of the communities involved in this. Does that sound okay?
Yep, only because again, I'm happy to also continue supplying the Zoom link for whatever meetings, but if the executive committee or anybody wants to volunteer to do it, I'm happy to give it up. But again, I'm happy to also send it out. I just need to know, can you guys all have my email, because I'm the one who's been sending you guys emails about updates for this meeting. Then just let me know then what date that would be, if that's the direction that we're gonna go.
Well, you know, Jason, while we have everybody on the phone now, it might be best if we at least select the date of the next meeting for at least the 5-person executive committee.
All right, so based on what people...
It seems like Thursday was a bit of a winner. Nobody seemed to have any conflicts on Thursdays. Generally.
All right. Going by that, that would put this, if we went a month from now, that would be April 25th.
Well, I think though that the 5-person group maybe should meet sooner to kind of get things squared away, like say April 4th. And, you know, we'll have the ideas, we'll put things together, and then we'll expand to the bigger group after that. Just a suggestion.
I'll leave that up to the executive committee.
Peter, I'm gonna suggest maybe send an email out to the 5 of us looking for dates, then we can kind of do that offline.
Okay. And in the meantime, but everyone can book April 25th, a Thursday, for the next group meeting.
That sounds great. And Chris, if you or Greg could just get me the contact information for the people on the executive group, that'd be helpful. Thanks.
Will do.
Jason, thank you for, and Chris and Jason and Greg, thank you for making this all happen. Thanks to all of my all of my fellow volunteers on the task force.
Thank you all.
All right.
Yeah, we really appreciate everyone taking the time to do this, and look forward to seeing what comes of this, and everyone working on this. So thank you all. I tried to keep it to about an hour and 13 minutes. So we tried.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
See
Hope
you
everyone
soon.
has a good night.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.